All right, we'll finish up Science in the Bible, page 274. Page 274. We did talk about quarantine. Do appreciate Brother Thompson's closing remarks concerning that. Even in this country, even in the 20th century, we had situations regarding disease and practices that were just not very intelligent concerning disease and wartime situations. And so even in this country, we fall prey to those things. And so a lot of good things have happened as a result of more knowledge, but the Lord knew about all those things ahead of time. All right, we're going to continue with laws of food consumption. And, you know, that's really one of the biggest things about the Jews that people notice, you know, from the outside, is that their diet was restricted. And why was that? And part of that is, of course, food preparation. Now, you know, we talked about this before, that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration of the United States of America, isn't the go-to, the end-all and be-all of, you know, what is safe for human consumption. They get it wrong too. But God does not get it wrong. And he also, not only does he know what's in, you know, either animals or preparation of vegetables, which usually is not that big of a deal there, of course, but he also knew the kind of conditions where food was going to be prepared. You know, people are not going to have nice kitchens and indoor plumbing and, you know, availability of various modern luxuries that we have today. They are going to be largely cooking, you know, outside over some kind of an open flame type of a scenario. During the 40 years, you know, they're not going to, even though the technology was there and they did it, you know, they were not going to do a lot of baking and making ovens, right? I mean, obviously they had ovens. Now, they were open flame ovens, but they were ovens. You know, they bake bread all the time. But that takes time to make an oven, doesn't it? A brick oven. You know, they're not going to do that. So all their cooking is going to essentially be out in the open. And if you have ever cooked on an open flame, guess what? It's very challenging. It just is challenging. Part of if you are cooking meat, some of the meat's going to get done very, very quickly, and then you're going to have other parts of the meat that are not going to get done quite as well. And so it is a struggle and a challenge to, you know, kind of get that done in a good way. So as a result, God says, look, this is what we're going to do. There are going to be foods, animals that you can't eat. We're going to call those clean animals. And then they're going to be, but most animals are going to be off limits to you. And we're not going to be able to do that, because God knows the things that are in animals and the diseases that they might transmit. Food regulations enumerated in the first 5 books of the Old Testament have been scrutinized repeatedly by credentialed professionals in the fields of dietary and pathological research. The regulations have proven to coincide with modern science's understanding of various aspects of health and disease prevention. Old Testament food laws exhibit knowledge of bacteria, food prep, pathogen awareness that surpasses anything from cultures contemporary with the ancient Israelites. Furthermore, there's no evidence that the knowledge inherent in the laws was or could have been gathered experimentally by the Israelite nation. And they didn't experiment, and they certainly didn't get their knowledge from the advanced, that's air quotes, Egyptians. They did some crazy things too. I think they had their own FDA. Thus, the Israelites could not have copied these laws from nations around them, nor did they arrive at them through their own experimental scientific research. Where then did such amazingly accurate laws originate? Moses repeatedly acknowledged that the laws came from the Lord, Deuteronomy chapter 10. Of course, remember, Deuteronomy is the second giving of the law. So when Moses gave the law at the foot of Mount Sinai over, a period of time, it wasn't just, he didn't just come off the mountain and, oh, here's the law, and just kind of spill it. It was over a period of time. And then, of course, the children of Israel sinned, and they had to wander in the wilderness for yet another 38 years. Well, as the children of Israel, about 4 to 6 months before crossing the Jordan River over to Jericho, Moses gave the law to the next generation. He gave it to them again. That's the book of Deuteronomy. So that's the second giving of the law. So Moses said, look, God gave me in Deuteronomy. Moses continued to affirm that God gave this law. These laws were not additions of, they did not originate with the mind of man. They came from the mind of God. These laws included a prohibition of eating pork, a meat that is known to be more susceptible to contamination than others, such as beef or mutton. They also prohibited the consumption of the bat, an animal with an extremely high probability of carrying diseases harmful to humans. The fact that animals in the water had to have scales and fins to be eaten would have helped the Israelites avoid bacterial-laden oysters and poisonous or venomous fish like the blowfish. Lionfish. I don't know how, readily available, those fish would be, to them, but certainly other things, such as, jellyfish, all shellfish, mussels, all that would have, all those types of sea creatures would have been available for consumption. They crossed the Red Sea, then on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, or Sinai Peninsula rather, I'm so sorry. They did not traverse the Arabian Peninsula. They did not do that. I apologize. On the other side of the Sinai Peninsula, you have the Gulf of Aqaba there, and so they were not necessarily close to the Mediterranean in their wanderings, but they were going to be close to the Mediterranean when they then got into the land of Canaan. And yet you're still going to have those situations as far as bacterial type scenarios with mussels and other shellfish and things of that nature. In addition, warnings against handling and eating reptiles would have cut down on the spread of salmonella. Since the vast majority of reptiles carry the bacteria, of course we already talked about that there in section 253 with the transmission of salmonella and things of that nature. So food consumption, and not just what they could eat, but also what they could touch. And we talked about frogs and other reptiles that they carry salmonella and other diseases that if Don't wash your hands after you touch that. It's a bad situation. There was no knowledge of bacteria. There was no knowledge of germs. There was no knowledge that you could pass a disease from one person to another, as we'll get to in just a second. But God knew that you could, those things existed. He created bacteria. And by the way, is all bacteria bad? No, we're all intelligent enough to know. We know this. Not all bacteria is created equally, is it? There are a lot of bacteria that are actually beneficial to us. And so bacteria is a good thing, certainly not bad. But you get the wrong kind of bacteria, is that a bad thing? Yeah, the wrong kind of bacteria at the wrong time. Have you ever been a victim of the wrong bacteria at the wrong time? Yes, we've been received that as well. Do not like the results of that. But that's all right. God knew that there are good bacteria, bad bacteria, and this is how you stay away from those things. Any thoughts or questions about food consumption? Yes, sir. Or touching things.
Well, there is a fish with fins and scales that if you don't handle it right, and I don't mean like the blowfish or anything else that's exotic, they can develop a bacteria, and I was a victim of one of those.
Oh, okay.
And it's a toxin, it's not so much bacteria, and it just
Right.
makes it have hives all over. It's not a true allergic reaction, it's just that it's histamine that's in the.
Oh, okay. Yep. Do you remember what fish that is?
I ate it in Sacramento, and it was.
Okay.
Was it tuna? No. Yeah, it was tuna.
Was it a tuna? Okay. Okay. Yeah, and sometimes fish do, even though they have fins and scales, they can, especially if they're not prepared correctly, when it takes you a little while to get the fish from its environment, the ocean or wherever, river, lake, wherever, to the plate, every minute counts, and so you just never know with all of that. But generally speaking, you're not going to have a huge problem. I do wonder. Well, of course, there are a lot of Asian countries that, just a lot of countries. I would say, and especially the coastal areas of our country, we eat a lot of fish. I wonder if mercury is a big issue, if that was ever a big issue, having too much mercury in the diet with eating that much fish. I don't know. Does anybody know? Anybody have any idea?
Yeah, there's a pretty large concentration of mercury in the fish that eat a whole bunch of other fish. So
Oh, okay, right.
fish have a little bit of mercury, but if you eat a lot of those, it builds up.
Okay.
It causes problems with the central nervous system.
So if you ate shark every day, that's worse than eating something that doesn't eat a lot of fish every day. Little fish, yeah, I got you. I can see that. All right, STDs. Countries across the globe are experiencing major academics. That's academic, isn't it? I did not put the P in that word. Epidemic, there we go, of sexually transmitted diseases. For instance, every hour in one Asian country, a baby is born with syphilis, and the rate of mother-to-child transmission jumped from 7 to 57 cases per 100,000 live births between 2003 and 2008. In recent years, syphilis cases were rising by 30% every year. Syphilis infection is increasing in the U.S. as well. To what do the experts attribute the surge of syphilis infection? Prostitutes, along with gay and bisexual men, many of whom are married with families, are driving the epidemic in parts of Asia. And in the U.S., more than 60% of cases are linked to gay sex. And so, STDs have always been a major factor. It seems like there was syphilis in Asia, and then in the Middle Ages, when Marco Polo came back, he came back with syphilis and others with him came back with syphilis to Europe, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of how that went. And maybe not Marco Polo specifically, personally, but those that, either him or those that were with him as well. And so it, obviously syphilis all over the world, but, a good number of us remember back in the 1980s, I don't know exactly when it started, but it came to prominence in the 1980s, the HIV/AIDS, if you want to call it epidemic or whatever. It certainly was prevalent in the homosexual community. And I remember that there were people who, nurses were getting AIDS or HIV because of tainted blood products, things of that nature. And so, that was a big concern. You don't hear about it as much today, but has it gone away? No, it has not. It has not gone away. Now, we do have some drugs that help with that, but there are still many people who are dying because of that very thing. So when you have a society that downplays marriage, encourages extramarital sexual activity at all, whether it's premarital or just extramarital in general, you are going to have major problems. And I also find it very interesting that you do have a number of situations, and I know for us as Christians, it's kind of what? But there are a good number of married individuals who also go outside of the marriage in a homosexual relationship. And obviously that causes big time problems inside the marriage, and if the wife and the mother then gets pregnant, that causes a lot of issues with that unborn child and the newly born child as well. So it causes a lot of problems. So what is the solution to epidemic STDs like syphilis? The U.S. Center for Disease Control, that's CDC for all you in Rio Linda there, outlined a simple, effective way to eradicate such diseases. The surest way to avoid transmission of sexually transmitted diseases, including syphilis and just everything, is to do what? To abstain from sexual contact or to be in a long-term, mutually monogamous relationship. Either don't have sex or get married and only have sex with that one person. Oh, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Who knew? Isn't that something? But because if you do not have sex, then you can't get the sexually transmitted disease, because that's how it's transmitted, right? That's like a no-brainer. But what do top education individuals, top psychologists, counselors, spilling over into the area of politics, of course, what do they all say, especially about our young people? What's the idea? And why they're going to, of course, well, we need to make birth control or prophylactics available to everyone. What's their idea? What do they say? Yeah, but why? Why? Allie?
I was gonna say in sex ed, when I was in school, I was taught if you're gonna have sex, have safe sex.
Oh, right. That's exactly right. That's, I mean, that's, no. But that's the whole point, is that you are going to do it anyway. That really is an insult to intelligence, is really what that is. It's saying that you cannot, as a human being, control your own body. That's what they're saying. And so what they really are doing is giving you permission, so you have authority figures that are giving young people permission to be involved with this particular activity. I hate to be a cynic, but folks, you gotta follow the money. Let's not kid ourselves. It's about the money. Hang on. Let's follow it through. Let's follow it through. You don't believe me? Okay, fine. Some of you are smiling because you know it's true, don't you? You know it's right. Do we not have programs upon programs upon programs to help young teens who are pregnant and keep their baby? We have programs that, you don't want to keep your baby. So now what do we have available? Murder. Legalized murder. That's exactly right. But folks, they get money for that. They get funding for that. It's all about the money. Has nothing to do with, it's a drive and we just have to follow through with that, and that's okay. Just have safe sex. Is there such thing as safe sex? No, there is not. I'm not going to call anybody out. I'm not going to do that. Because actually we know a lot of couples who, through their marriage, enjoy marriage as God has given it, and think, we're done with children, right? We're done. We're done. Know anybody like that? Phil, know anybody like that? And then God blesses that union yet again. Now that's a blessing, isn't it? Now that's a blessing. And so when you think, as human beings, we think, we're done with that, and we can continue with this activity, then there's not going to be, any further results from that. Folks, we don't know. And I've talked to a lot of people who were, birth control, multiple birth control, and yet pregnant. There's one safe sex, and that, of course, is abstinence. That's just the way that is. Okay, now.
One of the ways that people enable, and again, talking about money, is drug companies have come out with vaccines for AIDS and vaccines for anyway, it's another very common sexually transmitted disease.
Okay.
So they started encouraging, early teens to start getting this vaccination. So
Oh,
they can
yeah, yeah.
safely do it and
Right.
supposedly.
HPV?
Yeah, that's it. That's human papillomavirus.
Yeah, there you go. You know, and when Kelly is my daughter. Yeah, she's 30. I'm not even 30, so I don't even know how I got a daughter that's 30. But when Kelly was, I don't think she was a teenager yet. But anyway, when is it?
Normally they thought asking them to take around 12.
Around 12? Okay, something of that nature. And of course, it has to do with cervical cancer, I think, and some
But
other.
it's also been caused, it also causes
See,
other problems.
well, anyway, when Kelly was that, and by the way, if you get this, that's not a sin. That's not what I'm saying. I certainly don't want to suggest, and you come away with our discussion of, oh, well, you know, he didn't allow his daughter to have this. He thinks it's a sin, and I'm a horrible human being. No, that's not what I'm saying. Please, I'm not saying that. But when Kelly was 11, 12, whatever age she was, and the doctor said, oh, well, we think that she should get this particular vaccination to prevent whatever, you know, and it prevents or helps with whatever kind of cancer because of essentially extramarital sexual relationships. That's really what it is. No, we're not going to get that. We're not going to do that. Again, you know, if you have had that's fine. That's okay. But when it came to us and our daughter, you know, look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I am not. But just because the government says take this vaccine doesn't mean I'm just going to go ahead full tilt and go for it. Okay? I want to know a little bit more about it. And by the way, that was like when it was kind of first coming out too. And so I backed up. You know, Jennifer and I, we talked about this. No, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, if, and she wasn't, because we brought her up the right way, but you know, you can't take a shot against sin. Right? So it doesn't really matter from that kind of point of view. So we said no to that, and I think that we, you know, we were blessed in that decision. Again, if you have had that, that's fine. That's not a sin. I just want to be super clear about that. But we also need to understand that just putting all kind of stuff in our bodies, that has an effect. It does. So we need to be careful. We need to be educated about that. And that's the other thing too is, and that's why it's an insult to our intelligence to say that, you know, oh, well, young people are just going to have sex anyway. Well, you know, if you tell the truth about what's going to happen, what happens to the body, what the potential risks are, if you actually educate people about that, and then you bring them up, not just the physical risks, but the spiritual risks associated with sinful activity, oh, well, I'm going to choose not to do that. And hey, guess what? You can choose not to do that. And many people had chosen not to do that. Any further thoughts or questions? Yeah, Frank.
One thing I'll say, yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I think we need to be also a little bit careful about things people classify as
Okay,
because that's the easiest way to classify it.
right.
That can be spread through sex, but don't have to be spread through. So HPV is one of those.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be actual sexual intercourse to spread. HSV, like herpes, is another one, like it's the most common human virus out there.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, that
your
herpes
term
virus,
STD
definitely.
STD or STI, and it has certain connotations. But
Mm-hmm.
just, I mean, if you've ever been in a middle school locker room, like, that place is nasty.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, like, there's nothing sexual about it.
No.
There's all kinds of stuff running around in there.
Absolutely.
And so it's not a, even if, because society is society, if they're leaning in towards it and talking about it as if it's all sexually, but it might not only be.
And that is a good point, which is why I say, you know,
I'm not counter-arguing your.
no. I think that's a very good point to make. Because again, you know, kind of like the nurse situation with AIDS, you know, they did not contract that disease from their sexual activity. They contracted it because they handled blood that had that. And so you're exactly right. There are certain situations where you can get a particular disease that primarily might be, or maybe not even primarily.
It's most commonly spread sexually because
Yeah.
of our society.
Right, that's exactly right. But it doesn't have to be. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. That's exactly right. And so just because somebody says, oh, well, I contracted syphilis, that doesn't automatically mean that you got it in that particular way. And that's a very, very good point. I appreciate you bringing that up. Oh, Amanda.
Yeah, kind of go with that. I work with childhood vaccines all day. That's what I do. But yeah, the HPV vaccine actually it also prevents oropharyngeal cancers as well.
It prevents oral.
Oropharyngeal cancers.
Oh, okay.
Not just about sexual contact. It actually has other benefits as well.
Right, gotcha. Okay. And see, when Kelly was young, that was never said, never explained.
Me and Kelly are the same age.
Yeah.
It's strictly about HPV.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But again, you have to be educated. And what do you know about it? You know, what is there to be known about it? I find that very interesting that it's kind of changed, you know. That's also very interesting too. Again, which is why I say, if you do get something like that, it's not sinful, right? It just is not, because there is more that goes into it, but we do have to do our best to be as educated as we can, make the best decision for us and for our family, but to look at things not just from a physical standpoint, but also from a spiritual standpoint. We have to take that in consideration as well. Oh yeah, we still got a few minutes. Oh, good. Okay. Coming down here, the recipe for eliminating STDs bears a striking resemblance to the Bible's instructions concerning sex being reserved for the lifelong covenant marriage relationship between one man and one woman. And of course, you go all the way back to Genesis, as well as Matthew 19, Hebrews 13, 1 Corinthians 6, and also 1 Corinthians 7 as well. In truth, God's instructions concerning sex and all other aspects of human life have always been intended to help humans be truly happy. In Deuteronomy 6:24, Moses wrote, "And the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is this day." The biblical instruction in this regard agree perfectly with the best scientific research we have on the subject. And so our science and research is always going to be behind the Bible. God always knows what is best for us, whether it is in the areas of medicine, whether it's in the areas of food consumption or anything regarding those situations, or interpersonal relationships. God knows what is best concerning all of those things. And when we do that, then we are going to be living a fulfilled and joyful life, because everything that God gives to us is for our good always. And there's great benefit to following after the God of heaven. Well, I thought we would get through that, but I guess we didn't. That's all right. Circumcision next. That's a delightful subject, isn't it? That's a delightful subject, circumcision. It's actually a very, very important subject, to be sure. All right, second bell has already rung, and so we will conclude our study this morning. Thankful for your input today, your kind attention. We'll take just a short break at the top of the hour. Come back and worship our God together.